Robert ShedLog for Sunday the 30th of August 2020. Hello, I'm Robert and welcome to my shed where I've been working on my desk. These couple of pieces are parts of the back wall. This is the secondary back wall that forms the back of the drawer section and also the front of the cable carrier section. So I've been working most of the tongue and groove, and I wanted a quick video on why I've chosen to go the tongue and groove route. So normally, if you have a piece of wood, like either of these, they will. Let's get this square onto camera. So you've got the width, and you've got the short width and the wider width. And with changes in humidity, these will ever so slightly expand and contract, which is pretty much negligible on this size. It happens a bit, and you have to be a little bit careful that you don't push up something so hard that it's going to snap when the wood expands. You get something like 4% expansion off the top of my head, and that means you've got a fraction of a millimetre or so, which is generally within the tolerance of most joints, so you're probably okay. But this way around is a bigger problem, because I need to put both of these pieces of wood together side by side in order to make the wood as thick as I need. And this may only expand a few millimetres, but when you've got two pieces of wood together, this will expand twice that much. And in some places I have 4 pieces of wood adjacent to each other. So that means, quite simply, too much expansion. So how do we avoid that? Well, my solution is tongue and groove. Tongue and groove isn't something you use a lot in joinery. Often you'd have boards like this, you put them side by side, and then you mount them into a frame, allowing the mounting points laying a gap in the side of the frame for them to move. That seems like a bit too much work, and also requires more space because the frame has to be wider than the size of the wood. I don't have a lot of space to play with. If you were watching my last video on the dimensions, I didn't go into great detail, but it was pretty tight. So I've been making tongue and groove. Here we go. Tongue and groove works like this. You cut a tongue inside your one piece of wood, and the groove inside the other. And so when you slap them together, the wood is free to move side to side. The idea is you don't glue these down. So in fact, you can leave a smart slight gap between them. That looks okay. Adds a bit of detail. It's known as shadow gap tongue and groove. That just gives you a little bit of play on the width of the panel. Now, actually, I did make a bit of a mistake. I've cut this slightly too wide, so there's currently no gap. I might go and put a gap in later. So what I've done also, if you look at the ends here, is I've cut the grooves a few millimetres bigger than the tongues. So in this particular one, the groove is cut to the full extent I can get with my plough plane, by taking the depth stop off, giving a full depth cut, and the tongue is cut as deep as I can get with the depth stop on. So the tongue is easy. You just use the plough plane to cut a tongue right down the middle. That gives you a particular position. Cutting the groove is a bit harder. So I should have brought my plough plane out to show, but I didn't. So let's use this key instead as a plane. So if you imagine a plough plane can scrape out a section like this all the way along, you can position that very carefully based on the position of the groove you're putting the tongue into. So this side and this side are easy. That leaves you with a tongue on this edge here and on this edge here, and those tongues have to be taken off as well. Now, a plough plane can work as a rebate plane. That is, you can run it along one side and cut off all the material on that side. It can't work, well, it sort of can. It's not very good at cutting a rebate on the opposite side of the wood. So if you run the plough plane with the fence on this side and try and cut on this side, what happens is the depth stop is over here, which means the plane will just keep going because it's not hitting anything. And that's why on this one, I don't know if you can see, probably can't on camera, but there's a slight notch on the side there. The plough plane went a little bit too far on the second cut. Again, I don't think that's a big problem. I'll probably neaten it up at the end with the chisel anyway, just to give me that little shallow gap. Which I'm actually not looking forward to because it's quite a bit of work. It would have been possible to use a rebate plane and go this way, down from this side, because you're still going along the grain. The grain is this way. I didn't do that because this cut is wider than my biggest blade, and the blades aren't that easy to come by at the moment. Plough planes, so I just went with what I had. I've noticed this happening a few times. The groove, I don't know how well it shows on camera, but the groove is not square to the wood. Square the wood up, see the groove is at a slight angle. And I think that happened because I didn't quite have the screws tight on the fence. The fence was free to move a little bit, and so it just drifted as I cut. Probably only on one side of the fence as well. You get a little bit of play on the fence if you only screw one side down. That seems to push it away from the fence, which surprised me. I thought it would drag it towards it, but there we are. So that's where I am. Now next I have to work out how I'm going to, having built these walls without frames, how do I mesh them together? Because normally if you're building a bench, you would, building a pedestal, you'd start by building a frame out of carcassing, and then you fill in the sides. Do it a little bit differently. I'm building the sides out of tongue groove paneling. Solid pieces of wood, so I need this piece. I'm going to join to, let's say, this piece, like so, and I'm not quite 100% sure on the best way of doing that yet. I think what I might do is cut a 45-degree mitre on both of these to the depth of my saw, top and bottom. That will give me a partial mitre joint, and then using the rest of the joint I might cut a blind box joint. That's not to say I'm going to do the whole thing in blind joinery, because that would be a lot of work. So I might end up using box joints or dovetail joints or what have you on some of the corners. I'm hoping I can get away with, well, the particularly on the middle wall, which is internal, I'm hoping I can get away with housing joints in a couple of places. But I'm hoping to do the whole thing with joinery, and I'm hoping not to need any glue anywhere. If I hold the stuff up without glue, even if I then decide to glue it, it's a good sign. There will be some carcassing in order to keep the sides of the tongue groove panels at the right distance apart from each other. But that's more to stop movement than to hold it together. Which means the carcassing is going to be very thin. And because carcassing is very, very thin, that maximises the space for the drawers. So practical considerations come first, aesthetic considerations come second. I've cut all of these pieces to 725 millimeters. With the 40mm for the bench top, the desk top, that gives me 5mm too many. My plan for that is to cut the top 5mm and just get the plough plane out again and cut out the top 5mm for most of the width of the material. Probably actually just use the 6mm bit and go from the side, both sides. And then, once I've got that sorted out, I can And to make grooves, I can make corresponding slots, blind housing slots, I suppose, mortises effectively, in the top of the workbench, sorry, in the top of the bench top, the desk top, and that will allow the desktop to slide forward and backwards to access the cubbies at the back of the drawers, and cable runs and so on. That's my plan. As it stands, the bench top is too short. It will not fit across the entire body of the bench. Now, there's a couple of ways I can fix that, but I might not do. I might just leave it, at least for now. The problem is I'm working on this dining table, so I've got to get myself a bench as quickly as possible in order to have a proper working surface. So I'm trying to get something working. I'm going to do both pedestals properly, but without drawers. That way, hopefully, I'll have a working bench that I can use to work on. So that's all I've really got for you this week. I've been out today, so I don't have much time as I would normally to record things. Next week, I'll hopefully have something a bit more substantial to show you, and maybe even been getting on some joinery. Until next week then, ta-ta!